Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the Joe Rogan Kanye West interview that occurred in October of 2020. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So we see that Joe Rogan interviewed Kanye West, and a number of topics were discussed, including West's presidential campaign, religion, COVID, mental health, the music industry, and many of the different business ventures with which West has been involved. Kanye West is a singer, songwriter, producer, and fashion designer who is 43 years old at the time of the interview. He announced in July of 2020 that he's running for President of the United States. He didn't actually register by the deadline in a number of states, although he still could technically win enough states to be president. This interview lasted for almost 3 hours. It was unstructured. Here's a summary of the interview. It starts with Rogan asking about West running for president. West said that the idea hit him in the shower, that God put it in his heart. He said that initially people took it as a joke. West believes that he has a calling to be the leader of the free world, and it was time to put a visionary in the captain's chair. He is able to feel the earth. He has a lot of empathy. Now, by this point in the interview, we see what appears to be scattered thinking. West's narrative is fragmented, and his statements are a little confusing. Joe Rogan was confused by them as well. After this, we see a tangent about his music career. He said a lot here, but the central message seemed to be that musicians were cheated out of money by the entertainment industry. He suggested that Bruce Lee and his son Brandon Lee were murdered, which of course is not true. I recorded a separate video about Bruce Lee that I'll be releasing soon, and I'll record another one about Brandon Lee. His death occurred because of a series of failures. It's actually pretty interesting. At this point, West said they didn't want to go down these rabbit holes. I was thinking too late. This seems like an example of how one can think too far out of the box. For example, if somebody's 1 or 2 feet away from a box, that could be helpful. But Kanye West seems to be in an entirely different dimension from where the box is located. West talked about how he designed a monastery that will be the future of monasteries. Then he got into this particularly interesting point. He talked about how, because he was so successful, taking advice from people doesn't make sense to him. He would hear less successful people giving him advice and say, "Why would I listen to you?" I think it would be a good idea for him to reflect on the irony of this question coming from him and contemplate if that's a question that maybe should be directed to him. West doesn't like solar panels because he ties them to the dispute between Edison and Tesla. He said Tesla and Da Vinci created items that would revolutionize the world. West believes that people are possessed with demonic ways. He believes they are programmed. At this point, we see Rogan interrupt and ask the question, why do they think something's wrong with you? West explains how he thinks in full color, in 3D. He is a fearless leader going back many years. Kids followed him in preschool. Now, West was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2016. Here he says that the medications he was given to treat the disorder blocked his ability to channel what God wanted him to do. He couldn't remember what medication he was given, but he knew that it destroyed his confidence. Rogan asked him why he agreed to take the medication. West did not give a straight answer to this question. Instead, he went off on a tangent about South Carolina and the speech he made there as part of his run for president. He talked about uneven wealth distribution and indicated that fear was a disease attacking the world. West said that he was like Deadpool for God and had some criticisms over the way people interpret the value of the first 3 Star Wars movies. I believe he was referring to the prequel movies, so episodes 1, 2, and 3. Rogan tried to bring it back to the medication, saying, "I wish I understood how they talked you into the medication." This led to West talking about how people hold back agents of change, and how he developed sneakers with no laces. He took one of his sneakers off to show Joe Rogan these sneakers he invented. West talked about how he had 1 million images in his mind, his thoughts on utopia and how the home building industry is corrupt because it takes too long for houses to be built. Rogan then asked him how he organized his day. The response that West gave had a number of components. He drove his kids to school. He talked about his content production, pulling the future into the now, terraforming, and how he would like to make real life as awesome as video games. Sounds like a typical day for most people. I think this was a good example of how sometimes a poor answer to a question can actually answer the question. After explaining the difference between being energized and excited, West marveled at how many words end in the letters U-R-E, like pure and endure. I thought of a few as well: unstructure, lecture, failure. West revisited the topic of the entertainment industry, talking about how he wanted to buy Universal, I guess as part of this dispute he's having with them over his music. Now, toward the end of the interview, Rogan really tried to press West about the specifics regarding his presidential campaign. Here we see a litany of seemingly unrelated or loosely related thoughts. Here are just a few of them. West is one of the most famous and influential people. He's the CFO of his company. He was fired from the Gap at age 16 for stealing. Him being president would be the best thing for foreign policy. He never makes a wrong decision if he has all of the information. Fear prevents utopia. Spatial engineering will save us. West is a genius. West is off the grid. And he said that he will become the leader he needs to be. So what's going on in this interview? Well, first it's important to recognize that there's a difference between a person and a persona. I talked about this in other videos. West's behavior could all be an act. It could be part of a character he's trying to portray. There appears to be a theme of grandiosity. The appearance of being extremely confident is there as well. A major theme in the interview was how great Kanye West was, how he accomplished all these amazing things that ordinary people would never be able to do. He is admired by many. He is super famous. I find it interesting how he connects this with his reasoning about becoming president of the United States. It wasn't necessarily about how great he was, but about how he was chosen by God and was God-fearing. All the while, of course, saying that fear was the problem. West made a number of references to popular culture, so it's clear he's seen a lot of media, like movies and television shows. He's listened to a lot of music. He's learned about historical figures. He was fuzzy on the facts. It certainly was superficial knowledge at best, but he was aware of those references. He went on tangents very quickly and frequently, but most of the time he was able to remember the original topic. Not all the time, but I was actually surprised how well he was able to remember. Just because he was able to remember the original topic doesn't mean that his narratives made sense. It just means he technically remembered the question that he was attempting to answer. Now, talking about Joe Rogan's performance as the interviewer, on the positive side, I did like how Rogan was able to track the statements made by West. I thought Rogan actually summarized the statements fairly well a few times. I also liked how Rogan had knowledge of those references to popular culture. I think this is really one of the strengths of Rogan as an interviewer. He has learned about a variety of topics. On the negative side, Rogan seemed to be against medication. This is a popular theme with him. He was almost a little disgusted at the idea that West would be given medication for bipolar disorder. I can understand if Rogan doesn't like medications for himself, but he's really pushing this value on a lot of other people. Rogan paid West a number of compliments, minimizing how West's behavior could be potentially unhelpful and emphasizing only the possible advantages of West's racing thoughts and lofty ideas. There was really no challenging going on. I think Rogan was really feeding into West's ego. My last criticism of Rogan would be that he often asks multiple questions at the same time. In the world of mental health counseling, this is a common problem for new counselors because it's really kind of a natural way of questioning somebody, to ask a series of questions that sometimes are really not entirely the same question rephrased. The difficulty, of course, is that it makes it challenging for the person responding because they don't know which question to answer. I noticed on one occasion early in the interview where this practice confused Kanye West, as I think anyone would have been confused by that. Overall, I thought West avoided some of the pitfalls he has run into in the past, like I don't recall him mentioning microchips, the government tracking people, and some of the other conspiratorial references he has made. Some of the statements did tie in with conspiracy theories, but he really didn't emphasize that as much as he has in the past. He seemed to be a little bit more cautious about his responses. Even still, his self-aggrandizing and loquaciousness were not flattering, and I think the unusual characteristics of his thoughts didn't do him any favors in terms of winning voters over. At first, when I saw the interview was almost 3 hours, it was a little off-putting. That's pretty long for a video, but seeing West maintain that pace for 3 hours offered a helpful view for trying to understand his thought processes. I think the lesson of this interview is really how a high volume of thoughts alone do not create a message. There's a value to organizing thoughts and having them logically progress in a certain direction at a normal pace. This would be like if somebody was trying to learn how to play tennis by using a tennis ball machine, one of those machines that launches tennis balls over the net so people can practice. Perhaps the person may wonder if they would learn faster by changing the settings so that instead of launching a ball every 5 or 10 seconds, it launches a ball every second. Kanye West may have the same thought, except he would also add 20 more tennis ball machines. Looking at this from another angle, this would be like watching a history teacher lecturing in front of a class by listing random historical events for several hours, then being frustrated when the students can't offer a cohesive summary. The summary is the teacher listed a bunch of random historical events. There is no higher level that the students were missing. With that in mind, I think that's truly the summary of this interview. West listed a bunch of seemingly random opinions and events from his life that were not really organized into a cohesive narrative. Paradoxically, by doing this, he may have supplied voters with everything they need to know. So those are my thoughts on the Joe Rogan Kanye West interview. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.